Welcome back to Trey Fan Podcast. I'm your host, Rashawn, and I'm joined by an industry legend, known as to WWE fans as Muhammad Hassan. Copani became one of the most talked about and controversial characters in the mid 2000s with the sharp mic skills, commanding presence, and fearless storytelling. Challenged the top WWE superstars and made an instant impact on the biggest stages. Love or hate him, you have to respect him, and you can never ignore him. This is Marc Copani. Welcome to the show, my brother.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. Legend. I never thought about it like a legend. I guess I'm a legend for probably some of the worst reasons, but I'll take it.
Nah, man. I think like what you did for its time too is just you took such a character and was really good at your job, regardless of the fact, and it's very commendable, especially because as a heel too, you want to be drawing heat, right? That's the whole purpose of being a heel. So I thought you did like an incredible job with that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, when you're a heel, you live for those boos, man. That's exactly what you want, and that's what you feed off of, and that's what you work for. It's a little counterintuitive because you think you want to go out there and be a superstar and be cheered, but as a bad guy, man, you love people cheering instead of
Yeah.
cheering. So I definitely got a lot of those.
What was like your favorite part though? Like, did you think that you enjoyed being cheered more or obviously like booed more?
I'd like being booed. I mean, you go out there as a heel, and your job is to make the babyface, the good guy, look good. And the more they hate you, the more they like him. Even if they might have been indifferent about him before the match started, if they hate you so much they want to see you get your butt kicked, then they're going to start cheering for him no matter what. And so as a heel, that's what your job is to make the babyface look good and to bump around and make him look strong, and then go over on him and make the crowd want to see him win, and then kill their spirits by beating them.
So I'll then actually ask you, like, how did you get into professional wrestling? What was like your first introduction to it?
So I watched wrestling a lot as a kid. I was a huge fan growing up. I kind of lost it a little bit in the late 90s when a lot of people did, when wrestling was struggling a bit, and I was more into sports and girls and stuff like that in
Yeah.
high school and early college. Started watching again in college. One of my roommates was a huge WWE fan. I was WWF at the time, so I started watching it in college. I ended up moving in with this guy named Kevin, who was a friend of mine from back home. Huge wrestling fan. He kind of got me hooked on WWE, WCW, ECW. Started watching all kinds of wrestling. And he had a whole like library of old tapes, and so we would watch old wrestling matches as well as the stuff that was coming out on Monday nights and the ECW stuff that was coming out. And started to develop a passion for it. I mean, I was always athletic. I did intramural basketball at the time.
Oh,
I
nice.
worked out. Like I mean, I wasn't like a super athlete. I wasn't a D1 athlete by any means, or even a D3. But I had a lot of athleticism that I didn't know how to use, and so working out and playing basketball and being very into nutrition and eating right. And suddenly wrestling started to seem like something that might be a possibility. And like I said, I fell in love with it and found out about the OVW training camp when I was on the dirt sheets. Like back then, it sounds so stupid. Like people, especially your younger audience, me, you look young.
Yeah.
There was a time where like the internet was a new thing. People don't
Yeah.
understand that when I went to college, we had like the intranet or whatever it was called, which means our computers were hooked up. And so you would exchange music and things like that
Yep.
on a network. But as far as internet goes, like you had dial up, like there wasn't a huge presence of wrestling on the internet for me growing up. But
Yeah.
in college, that changed. And so I started reading the dirt sheets and, found out about this place called OVW. And I was a huge fan of John Cena before he was even in OVW because I'd seen him on some TV programs. And I thought, this guy is like, it was, I can't remember the name of the show. I think it was on Fox. It was like a kind of like a game show, and he played like the prototype character. But
Yeah.
I saw that he went down there, and it kind of piqued my interest about this must be a very serious place because this dude is super talented.
Yeah.
Um, and it was an impulsive decision, man. I kind of left school. I told my parents I was moving to Louisville. If they, everybody thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, Packed up my car. I drove down to Louisville, and I enrolled in the OVW Saturday classes and started taking my first bumps with Nick Dinsmore and Danny Davis in the ring. And that was kind of it. It kind of went from there. It's something you have to love because
Yeah.
you're told no more than you're told yes. You live in pain, and it's not like I got paid to do anything. I was working at Chili's, waiting tables, trying to make ends meet. I didn't even have furniture for a very long time. We lived in all of us packed into like an apartment.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's something that we loved and we were passionate about. And I was lucky enough to have a great group of guys and friends and people that I was surrounded by that were into wrestling, and it just kind of carried me from there.
So did you have any other like other options of careers choices, or that like as soon as you saw that as an opportunity, that you're like, this is the one I'm going to make sure that happens?
I mean, I wanted to be, I was a history major, and I ended up being a history teacher after wrestling. I love history.
Yeah.
Not really sure what I would do with it. When I was in college, I actually got really into like kinesiology and exercise science. And I started taking a lot of classes that revolved around nutrition and, like I said, exercise science. And I was really into that. I remember meeting with my counselor, I think my junior year, and I wanted to switch majors. And she told me that if I were to switch majors, I would have to spend a whole other year in college just to get that major of
Wow.
exercise science to be like a trainer. I was thinking like an NFL team or something like that. At that time, I really wasn't into college. Like I didn't drink, I didn't live the college life. I was really into working out and I was really into wrestling. And
Yeah.
that was kind of what made the decision for me, was that I just didn't want to spend another year in college. And so that's when I packed up and moved to Louisville. But I mean, I was always interested in being an actor, like I said, I loved working out all over the place. I loved academics. I loved history. And I also loved performing. So I say to kids all the time, because, I was a teacher, then a principal, and now I'm director of human resources. You don't need to know what you want to do. I didn't really figure out what I was going to do really until I was 30. I mean, I didn't have my career in education until I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
But you have to be passionate about something. And as long as you're working hard towards a goal, then you're always going to be successful.
No, for sure, for sure. And that's actually like really telling because even for me, like I'm 28 and for a while, like I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was stuck in that kind of a loop where you feel like, oh, time's going. Like I'm in such a rush and you don't really have like a second to kind of sit in with your thoughts and process like, oh, this really for me or not? So it's good to know that like, even though it feels like you're kind of behind, you're actually really not.
Yeah, no, like I said, I mean, some people don't figure it out until they're 30. Some figure it out when they're 18, and good for
Yeah.
them. But as long as you're doing something and moving forward, then you're making progress. And that's the important thing.
For sure, for sure. So talk to me about OVW and your time experience there and then eventually leading to getting that first call from WWE to come up.
So I'm working with Ben Veal from Wrestling Life. He's over in England. He's fantastic. He wrote Mark Merrill's book, From Bad to Good. We're working on a book called Heat. And we're a few chapters in. We're going to sit down and start to really settle and focus on OVW, because OVW is kind of like this lost golden age of
Yep.
wrestling. I mean, I got there right as Randy and Brock were really taking off, and then they were there for almost maybe a year when I was there, and then they were gone. And at that time, there was John Cena and Dave Batista, Shelton Benjamin. Like, these guys were really starting to turn into superstars.
Yeah.
And after that, it was, Nick Dinsmore, Rob Conway, but everybody came. Rene Dupree, Matt Morgan. I mean, everybody came through OVW at one point. It was really the only wrestling territory that was training WWE talent. And there's not a lot about it. There's not a lot of stories about it. And so Ben and I are really going to focus in Heat on my experience in OVW, because I just happened to be in the middle of all of it.
Yeah.
When I got to OVW, I was green. I was like one of the kids, they called me, with Randy and Brock and Dave and John, and Nick was my trainer, and Rip Rogers and Rob Conway and Danny Davis and Jim Cornette. But when I left OVW, I left as a veteran. And this was when guys like Bobby Lashley were coming through, some of the
Wow.
guys that you would see after me. So this whole era, this whole 4 years that I was there, really kind of developed the talent that is the legends today, and then the talent that became the legends after them and are still legends now. Bobby Lashley is still a legend. I mean, I could go on and on about all the talent that came through OVW.
Yep. Yep.
But it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. We lived together, we trained together, and once I got signed under contract by the WWE, I could quit Chili's and really focus on working out and wrestling.
Yeah.
But that was our life. Like me, Mickey James, Matt Morgan, Johnny Jeter, Chris Cage, Shad Gaspard, Chris Masters, Carlito. Like, we would all
Wow.
train.
Yeah.
We'd train, and then we'd like go to Moe's and get lunch, and then we come back and we'd hang out all night, and then we get up in the morning, we go train. A lot of people would think of college as the best times of their life. Like, I think of OVW as the best time of my life.
Sure.
So I'm really excited to get a chance to sit with Ben, and we're going to start writing about this. This Heat is more of an autobiography, and Ben's helping me write it. But like I said, it's going to focus more on the wrestling aspect of my life, which is kind of odd because, again, I didn't have a very long wrestling career, but I
Yeah.
think it's interesting in the sense that I was in the middle of OVW during this time where all this talent just exploded. And
Yeah.
I was part of it. I was part of OVW. I wasn't part of the WWE for very long, but I was a central part of OVW. One of the coolest things is that show on Netflix with OVW. I was watching it. with Al Snow.
Yeah, I
And
started.
my
It's actually really
pictures,
good too.
yeah, it was awesome. And my
Yeah.
picture's up on the wall. And I remember calling, my son over to come take a look. It was a huge, proud moment for me. And might not seem like a big deal, but just the fact that I was there and I'm one of the people that's recognized as being, one of the stars from OVW, it
Yep.
just means a lot to me because that place meant so much to me. So I'm really excited in this book, which is going to be out next summer. We're shooting for next summer to tell the stories of OVW that people have never heard because it was the mecca of developmental wrestling. And I don't think there's ever been, other than NXT, I'd say NXT is
Yeah.
probably what rivals OVW today. So my time in OVW was amazing. And it was, like I said, the thing that carried me through, and I credit all of my friends in OVW to becoming Muhammad Hassan, was having this group of people that lived and breathed and slept wrestling. And all we
Yep.
did was wrestle. And we would be there early. We'd stay late. We'd watch tapes. Like I said, we'd go get lunch. We'd come back. We'd watch tapes. We'd watch the shows. That was my life. I was completely immersed in it. And I was surrounded by incredible talent. It's a who's list of professional wrestling from the last 20 years when I started to think of all the people that I was fortunate enough to cross paths with in OVW. And so we're going to focus on that and then transitioning into the WWE, which was a very interesting time as well. It was
Yep.
kind of the end of the Attitude Era
Ruthless
and
aggression
really,
era.
and a ruthless aggression and a huge change into what wrestling is today. So, like I said, this book is going to cover a lot of very unique experiences that I had and hopefully in a very entertaining way.
No, I'm very excited to hear about that, man. And I think what's so cool is like you mentioned so many of those key names that end up obviously coming to WWE after. While that time was happening, what was it like for you when you see all these guys like Shelton Benjamin, you see Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, Batista? Like, what were you thinking initially when you're like, holy crap, like there's a lot of star talent here too. Like how I gotta like set myself apart.
I mean, I didn't think I would ever set myself apart from them. Shelton Benjamin's like the most athletic human being I've ever
Yeah,
encountered in my
he's really
entire
athletic.
life. I idolize Shelton and everything he did. I tried to do, and I didn't do it nearly as well. I remember one time I squared up with him in the ring. Like he was a superstar amateur wrestler. I've never amateur wrestled, and he just looked at me and he kind of laughed. He's like, "You're helpless right now." And without knowing what he meant, I knew exactly what he meant. Like if he
Yeah.
wanted to, he'd just take me right down, and I'd do nothing about it. But it was really cool to be able to learn with these guys. So when I started the Saturday class, it were people who were amateurs, called the amateur class, and they paid to learn how to wrestle. They recognized that a few of us had talent, and we were athletic enough to at least be tackling dummies for the WWE
Yeah.
guys. So this is at the old Davis Arena in Jeffersonville, Indiana. So they invited us to come on Tuesday nights. And so aside from the Saturday class, I would go on Tuesday nights to Davis Arena where guys like John Cena and Matt Morgan and Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin, those guys were wrestling all the time. Like those guys were
Yeah.
wrestling 24/7. And so we would go and they get practice moves on us. Danny or would be teaching them, and Rip would be teaching them some things in the ring, and they would use us as practice dummies. And it was really a cool experience to be able to get in there with those guys. And what you learn is that you see these guys and you idolize them because you watch them on TV. Well, I was sweeping the arena. Shelton Benjamin's main eventing on OVW, but
Yeah.
then I get in the ring with them and I can wrestle with them. I mean, obviously I can't amateur wrestle, but I can professional wrestle with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can get in there with John Cena and I can wrestle with John. And it's confidence building because these guys are so talented and so out of this world that it's almost defeating. Like I'm never going to be as good as these guys. Like I'm never going to be able to get in the ring in WWE on Monday Night Raw with John Cena and hold my own. But once you get in there and you practice and you move with them, look, maybe I can. Maybe I have a shot. I mean, I got a
Yeah,
lot
for
of
sure.
work to do, but maybe I have a shot. So that was probably the coolest thing about working with some of that incredible talent was their talent and their greatness brushed off on you because you learned from them and you learned while they were learning. So the things that Danny was telling or Nick was telling them in the ring, you're learning as well. So being around better talent just makes you better no matter what.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So talk to me through that experience, when you got the call from OVW, sorry, from WWE to OVW, saying they were interested in signing you.
Because I was outside, lived in an apartment complex in Louisville, Kentucky. I was working at Chili's. I was heavyweight champion. I was Mark Magnus at the
Yep.
time, OVW heavyweight champion, which was a huge accomplishment because if you think of all the incredible talent that's held that belt, That belt has had just as much talent almost as the WWE
Yep.
heavyweight titles. John Cena, Batista, Shelton, Nick Dinsmore, Rob Conway, Doug Basham, like locals and WWE legends as well. So I got the call. I was offered $750 a week, which at that time was so much money
Hmm.
compared to what I was making waiting tables at Chili's.
Yeah.
And I remember just kind of breaking down. It was the realization of a dream. At that point, Johnny Jeter, who was and Chris Cage were two best friends. Those are the
Yeah.
guys that I was with the most. Johnny Jeter was Johnny Jeter and Spirit Squad. Chris was a tag team, and I'm so sorry I forget his name right now. Chris Cage, he was in OVW. It'll come to me, but I just remember kind of breaking down with them. Jeter was already signed. Cage
Yeah.
and I were not. Got my contract. And I remember just having this feeling of accomplishment and also this feeling of determination because now I could quit my job and I could focus on wrestling 100%. And at that time, I was in the OVW training class 5 days a week with the WWE guys,
Yeah.
except they got paid to do it. And I was one of the only ones who didn't. So after I was done, they got to go home and relax. I had to go put my uniform on and go work at Chili's. Otherwise, I wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to pay my rent or eat. So it was a huge sense of relief, but it made me determined to get even better.
That's crazy, man. And I was gonna say, like, especially when you grew up watching and having that kind of like I made it moment in a sense. Was it ever like worrying for you that like, oh, if it's like not possible for me to make it to WWE? Did you ever have those doubts?
I think you always have those doubts, and I think it's good to have those doubts. I think
Yeah.
those are the doubts that make you work harder and really help create discipline and determination. So I definitely had those doubts, especially because I was surrounded by some of the best talent. When we first started, Johnny Jeter was such a naturally talented wrestler,
Yeah.
and he was so much better than I was. And we both worked really hard, but he just was and he was a baby face. And it was like you always kind of get into wrestling thinking you want to be the good guy. You
Yeah.
watch rooting for the good guys, the Shawn Michaels, the Hulk Hogan, and he was a natural baby face. I remember it was discouraging for me to see how easy it came to him.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think it might have been Rob Conway who told me that just one day a light bulb's going to go off and you're going to start to get it. And my first few matches were horrible. That they were absolutely just awful, 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 awful. And Jeters were good. And maybe a year and a half, 2 years in, that light bulb went off, and I started to get it, and things started to come together.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that I'm a better heel than a baby face. And so you start to put all of that together, and you have your doubts, but at the same time, you have to have a lot of confidence to even get in the ring, do something like that, because without that confidence, you're going to get hurt. I mean, you have to be confident when you hit the mat. You have to be confident when you're running the ropes. If you hesitate at all, that's when your body's out of sync, and that's when
Yep.
injuries happen. So it's a little bit of both. I think it's always good to be hard on yourself. I think it's always good to have those doubts because they
Yep.
push you to work harder. But underneath all of that, you have to really believe that you can do it, or else you're just wasting your time.
And that's the thing, like you said that you found like there was gonna have a light bulb moment for you, obviously, right? So when that moment actually happens and you actually find kind of like what's your niche in a way, or like what works for you, then it's easier for you to just continue to go down that path. So when you were first told about the character that you were playing, how much of you was worried about the perception of the public? Was that all a concern at all?
Not really. You have to remember this was also a very different time in the United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
And in OVW, we pushed the boundaries because it was wrestling, and wrestling at that time was edgy, and wrestling pushed the boundaries. I mean, think of
Yeah.
what they were doing in 2000 and 2004. That with women wrestling, with just everything. As far as I'm just thinking like Mae Young and like
Yeah. The
I'm just
storylines
thinking
were
Mark Henry and like all the things they were doing, and so I knew it was heat, and they were very clear when they explained to me that this is a different level of heat. And Sergeant Slaughter was a great example of
yeah.
the kind of heat that this would generate. I also knew it was a great opportunity, and I also knew that it was a character that had a lot of potential. There was never a doubt in my mind that I was going to do it. Never once did it occur to me to maybe say, I don't know. It was nope, not at all. I mean, I trusted that they would do it well, and
Yeah.
I loved the idea of being with Sean. And I love the idea of being this foreign heel because I grew up watching these foreign heels and hating
Yeah.
them. And once I accepted the fact that I'm always going to be the bad guy, I knew I would get a lot of heat, and I knew that it had the potential to be a huge character. So a little bit of, a little trepidatious.
For
My
sure.
family was probably much more than I was.
Yeah.
I was ready to dive all in. I mean, this was a Vince McMahon idea, so I definitely knew it was going to have a lot of potential to shoot to the moon.
And like you were saying too, was just like the whole confidence thing plays such a big factor. If you are not believing your own words when you're saying them, people could obviously tell. And the fact that obviously what you were saying, you were so powerful with it that I feel like it really did hit a lot of people. But that's what made it so good for like entertainment wise.
I believed everything I was saying. I
Yeah.
didn't go out there at all and lie. I experienced it. I experienced what it was like to be Arab American or Muslim American in early 2000s. Sean and I definitely experienced that everywhere we went. So I wasn't lying, and I think that's what made the character so genuine. I think that's what generated so much heat is you believed me when I said what I said because I believed it. I wasn't just saying it to say it. I was telling you, my experience and what I felt. And I felt like at the time before it got a little distasteful, I was almost a mouthpiece for Muslim American young men in the United
Hmm.
States. At that time, after 9/11, with everything going on, it wasn't even, it's funny how idiotic racism becomes when people lose their sense of rationality as far as they were just anybody who had tan skin was suddenly a terrorist,
Yeah.
anybody who had something on their head was a terrorist. Like it didn't matter if they were born here, it didn't matter. Like Sean Davari is like one of the most American people I've ever met. Like Sean is more American than most Americans born in Georgia. And I'm just saying Sean was treated like a terrorist just because of the way he looked. And you start to realize how stupid racism is when you experience it on that end because people make judgments and assumptions without having any idea of what they're really looking at or what they're really hearing. And I've experienced that all even just because of playing the character after wrestling was over. So it didn't really stop with the character. A lot of people had a hard time believing that it was, in my mind, I'm playing a character. But for a lot of people, it was, a lot more real than WWE intended it to be.
And that's another thing too, was the reason why I felt like I related to it a lot was because obviously I'm Muslim too. And like when I was watching it as a kid, I'm like, some of the stuff that you were talking about was some of the things I actually experienced as a kid. So I actually related a lot to it, and I felt like it connected very, very well.
And that to me is the tragedy of the character because when the character first was developed, we didn't know what we were going to do. But once we figured out that this was an American character, and to me, that's what made Muhammad Hassan so unique. He's an American, he's not a foreign character at all. Even though you go out there and everybody's chanting USA, again, it's nonsensical because I was very clear that I was from the United States.
Yeah.
So you're not chanting anything, negative towards me if I'm a proud American. But um, that character was so interesting because he really spoke about the injustice that was happening. And at the same time, it was again hypocritical because I was a heel character, and that's wrestling. You have to be entertaining, and you have to be able to sell the match. And so I was a heel, but what I was saying was real. And when the character started to become distasteful and really become more of a fanatic as far as Islam, what we were doing with Shawn and the Undertaker, I did feel like it was misrepresenting that population. And it wasn't until then that I really felt like I had some sort of responsibility for representing it. That's when I realized that it was more than just a character, because people were looking at this. And now I wasn't just speaking for Muslim Americans and the injustice they faced, I was actually making it worse because what I was doing and what I was saying was actually feeding and validating the prejudice that was already out there. And it sounds stupid to say because it was my career, but I'm kind of glad. I'm glad that that character ended. I just
Hmm.
didn't want to be attached to something like that, anymore. Being raised the way I was and believing what I believe. At first, I'm playing a character, but like I said, once we start validating prejudicial beliefs, I had a real problem then. I was vocal about that, and I think that was one of the reasons why I was never brought back afterwards.
How did you personally separate like Marc Copani from Muhammad Hassan when the reactions got intense? Because was it ever, something that maybe like made you feel about yourself at all? Like just how because I know some fans can be a little bit, much.
Face to face, rarely did we have an issue. Sometimes we did. For me, when I got home, I lived in DC at the time. When I got home, I was Marc Copani. People might recognize me, but I'm living in Washington D.C. It's a pretty multicultural city.
Yeah.
I'm able to separate that. My last name's Copani. I don't get any flack going through the airports. I could go out and not really feel the same. Like when I'm with Sean Davari at the airport, or when I'm wearing the job, when I'm wearing everything to look like a Muslim, it was very different for me. I could step away from it. I come home to Syracuse, New York, and
Yes.
suddenly I'm Marc Copani and everybody knows me. But what I realized is like with Sean and other people, they don't get to separate from that. That's their life. That's
Yeah.
every day. And I was fortunate enough and had the experience that I could experience what it was like to feel that prejudice and that racism, but I could also step away from it. So I was very lucky. So I was able to separate Marc Copani from the character because one, that's what you're trained to do. We play characters. Wrestling's a
Yeah.
story of characters. Never once did I think I was playing a real Arab. I always knew that I was playing a character. And two, I was fortunate enough and lucky enough that I could walk away from it and just go back to being, Italian Marc Copani from Syracuse, New York.
Okay. So, Mark, so I want you to know, like, you as a person, a pro wrestler, like, was so good at your job and just like how you carry yourself, your mannerisms, promos, wrestling ability. And it's such a shame that you lost your job at such a, you're so great at it. You deserve your flowers. You have such a positive outlook and it's very commendable and heartwarming. And I think that, with everything that you've done with your life, all the stuff that's paid off, I just want you to know that, like, something I've been wanting to say to you as well. Just because watching the doc series, like it was so inspiring just to see. And yeah, I just wanted you to know that. Yeah. I've been waiting to say that to you, man. So,
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
so last question before we get out of here, what makes Marcopani happy today?
Hmm. I think a few things, obviously. My son plays basketball. I love watching him play basketball, especially when he's having a good game. That's definitely, he scored
Yep.
14 points in a row last Sunday, and
Oh,
it was
nice.
really cool to watch. Oh, yeah, he's just on fire hitting them. I think I'm happiest other than when I'm with my son is when I'm engaged at work, working with a talented
Yep.
group of people around helping kids. I can't really think of anything that makes me light up more. And I'm always having fun. I mean, I have a very serious job and I do take it seriously, but I also try to have fun and keep it
Yeah.
light because some of the things we deal with are, just it's sad. Some of the things we deal with are the challenges and the struggles that we see kids face that are just completely unfair. It's hard for it not to wear on you, and it's hard
Yeah.
to not carry it home with you. So I always try to have fun and keep it light. But I work with such a great group of people, and I'm in charge of, director of human resources, 900 people or so in the district, including everybody. And I like making connections in each and every one. I like going to the buildings and walking around and seeing the amazing work they do. And I do this program that is on the Fulton City School District website called Fulton School Champions. I started with this guy, Alex Richmond. He's our PR guy a couple of years ago. And basically, what we do is a community, we have a nomination form. They select 3 people out of the 900 every month that they think went above and beyond to help children, staff, the community, et cetera. And our committee looks at it. We pick 3, and then I set up this surprise.
Yeah.
Like for example, we had a faculty meeting the other day, and at the faculty meeting, I had a student come out who wrote this teacher a nomination, which was just really heartwarming and touching about how impactful she was. So impactful in this student's life that the student is now going to become a teacher.
Wow.
And I get to come in front of the entire faculty. And a lot of times when we do this elementary, we do it in front of all the kids. And I get to call that person to the front of the room, in front of the crowd, and tell them how awesome they are and read their nomination. In this case, the student actually read it. And to see somebody come in to work one day just thinking they're going to a normal day of work, and then to have them be recognized by so many
Yeah.
people for the amazing things they do, it is very stressful. It's like people always think it's so much fun, and I'm like, it's not fun. I mean, we reward them with like a
Yeah.
really substantial prize. This month it was $100 gift certificate to Chubby's, which is one of the best restaurants,
Oh,
bars and
nice.
grills in Fulton. But it's like putting together 3 surprise parties every month, coordinating
Yeah.
with children, with staff, principals, and then not getting caught. You have to surprise this person. It's kind of like the old Publishers Clearinghouse, where we kind of guerrilla style rush them, and suddenly they're the center of attention and they're being recognized. And so to be able to do that when these people put their heart and soul into helping kids, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And my job isn't always great. The director of human resources is the one who, is in charge of hiring, firing, layoffs, things like
Yeah.
that. But to be able to work in the school district with such great people and affect the lives of students in such a positive way, when a lot of them just don't have the opportunity to have positive role models,
Yeah.
um, that's what I get up for every morning. Aside from spending time with my son and my family, that is what makes me happy.
All right, last question.
And
If
you can check that out on the Fulton City School District website. We post every week on Wednesdays typically. It's really cool, man. We get like 15 to 25 to 30,000 views for each video.
Wow, yeah, I'll definitely will, man.
So these people who are, like I said, we work in a tiny little city called Fulton. They're being seen around the state, and sometimes this is shared around the country.
Yeah,
And they're being recognized, like I said, for being amazing educators. And they just got up and came to work that day. So it's a really cool program, and I really would ask. And it's on Instagram too. So I hope anybody checks that out just to see the great work these people
yeah.
do.
Feel free to like plug in the Instagram handle.
If I knew how to do it, I would. Rashawn, how about you? You could throw it up there after. You can.
I'll throw it up after. Yeah, you just give it to me and I'll throw it up. That's no problem.
All right.
All right, last question. If you could give advice to someone trying to break into the industry, what would it be?
I think the thing that, well, a few things, but the thing that helped me the most, like I said earlier, is being surrounded by people who were immersed in the business and who appreciated the business. I mean, we didn't
Yep.
just go in and think we knew wrestling, and we didn't go in and just talk and like we're going to be big time wrestlers. We learned wrestling. We learned from some of the greats. I know not everybody's fortunate enough to learn from Danny Davis, Jim Cornette, and Rip Rogers like
Yeah.
I was, or even, Doug Basham, Nick Dinsmore, Rob Conway. But you can surround yourself with people who love and appreciate wrestling. And the most important thing you could do is watch all
Hmm.
kinds of wrestling. We would watch New Japan. We would watch, like I said, ECW, WWE, Ring of Honor. We would watch everything we can get our hands on because they're all different styles, and you take a
Yep.
little bit from each one of them. And when see people all the time who are in wrestling in Syracuse, and they'll ask me a similar question, and I always say, take care of your body. Not just to look good, because obviously that does sell, but also so you stay healthy. It's
Hmm.
not an easy business. And if you're not taking care of your body, if you're not working out, eating right, stretching, you're going to get injured and you're not going to have a lot of longevity. And the more you get injured, the less you're in the ring learning. So you want to be a student of the game, but you also want to be a student of nutrition and exercise because you want to be healthy and you want to be able to be in there at the top of your game for as long as possible. And I think those things are really important if you have any chance to make it in the business.
Perfect. Mark, once again, thank you so much for your time. And, as someone that was growing up watching you, like I really appreciate this. And it was incredible to hear your story. And, definitely if you ever want to come back on the show, I'd love to have you again. I just appreciate you again for taking the time and just all the impact you did for me as a kid.
Absolutely. So how about I come back when Heat comes out this summer with Ben Veal? And then the book that I'm writing called Wrestling with Adversity, How to Deal with Life's Challenges. That's about my experience of losing my dream in an epic failure, so to speak, and then finding another one. That's coming out Christmas of 2026. So I'd love to come back then.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
anybody can follow me on Instagram. Just look up my name, Marc Copani, and follow me on Instagram. That's mostly my professional page. So
Yeah.
I'll post my story and my upcoming. I'm going to be out at Steel City Con out in Minnesota, out in Indianapolis in March, and I'll be at Squared Circle Expo at the end of March, March 28th in Indianapolis. So you can catch me there. But like I said, follow me on Instagram, and
Yep.
that's where I post most of my appearances and my books. Everything will be out on that.
Yeah. And we'll see you back in hopefully December. Thank you so much for your time, Mark. And yeah, we're out. Thank you guys.
All right.